Welcome to Stay Tuned, a chance for us to just decompress with what just happened on stage. I hope you enjoyed our concert. Yes? Such an amazing, varied program, and these wonderful artists here on stage with me. It's just such an honor and a pleasure to introduce everyone to our community, our Fresno Philharmonic family. And I think, this is such an incredible program that brings music together, brings us all together as a community, and in so many ways, especially in this very special project inspired by Mas's family here in the Central Valley, and these wonderful composers both based in California, and of course our wonderful soloist from Belfast, correct?
Yeah, I was born in Belfast.
Born in Belfast. So,
I don't live there anymore.
Okay. And I want to thank you, the audience, for really supporting us in this program. It means a lot that we sold out both concerts. So thank you so much. So this project, this commission with Hitomi and Erika has been a 2.5 year process. And I'm sure you're well aware of how this all came together. Maybe not? Yes? No? Okay. Well, Mas, why don't you start? Because I met Mas my first season here in 2017, and I was just amazed by the story of your history here in the Central Valley. And then how did we come about this project? Can you tell us a little bit your perspective of how it came together?
Well, Ray approached me and started talking that maybe I could write a story that the Philharmonic would be able to perform. And I was stunned because I said, I'm not a musician. I don't even know what a libretto is. I don't know what this is going to be about. And then the more we talked, I realized what I wanted to really do was to simply write a story that captured the sounds of the valley, the sounds of history. So I embedded it in the idea of the generations of loosely based on my family, and thinking of our family history and farming to the sounds that we hear and feel and live, and then pass it on to the composers who then work their magic to transform it to a different level. And that's what it started out, and I think that's what happened.
Yes, and then we had orchestral readings for these composers to test out their material. Can you share a little bit about the 3 readings that we had over the course of a year and a half? What your thoughts were about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So after we received the manuscript from Mas and we started experimenting, we had the amazing experience of being able to have 3 readings, as Ray said. The first one was with strings and percussion, and then we had woodwinds and brass and percussion. In the final one, we got to experiment with the full orchestra, and this was vital to the creative process. We were able to actually, it felt more like a collaboration. We were able to get feedback from musicians. We heard what it sounds like when live musicians are playing, which is just completely different than imagining things, and also even getting feedback digitally. And so it was completely vital to this process, and we feel like this is essential if in supporting new works as they're going forward.
Do you want to share, Erika, how you felt? What did you think of the performance?
Oh, it was stunning. Oh, the musicians really, oh my goodness, what an amazing group of musicians. And you just really bringing to life everything, and yeah, it was thrilling.
Well, and this creative process is very much like when we're doing a concerto together, and we're on stage, and Barry, you just flew in just a couple of days ago. We rehearsed a couple times, but each time you're creating as you're playing, correct? I mean, how does it feel when you're playing this concerto? You've probably played it a lot.
Yeah, that's a very good question. It's never the same, of course, because we're never the same, and the listener is never the same. So when you walk into the concert hall, you're in a different mood from the last time you went to a concert hall. It's just normal, and you've matured even more, and goodness knows what. But for us musicians, what we have to find each time is some kind of truth, so it makes sense. It shouldn't be about the performer, it should be about the music that's being created. And so each time we rehearse, we delve deeper And that's why when you play a piece over the years, it matures, hopefully. I mean, there's a story that a conductor told me once. At the beginning of his career, he played with a very famous violinist. He played the Beethoven Violin Concerto. And then 20 years later, he had the good fortune to play with this same violinist. And he was shocked because it was exactly the same. But that's the exception, not the rule.
Yes, and I think this whole creative process, you know, as artists, it's always a journey. It's always feeling like it's never done, you know. And every time we were playing, this is the second performance of Meguru, and it feels different. Like the musicians played it differently today than last night. And so this is the joy and the beauty of art, is that it's never fully done. You know, there's no cap to it, unless you're that violinist. And what's interesting is that 5 years ago, Barry, you were here in 2020, the same month, February, right before the pandemic. And, you know, speaking of like history and time and, you know, the programming, we did a Gabrielina Frank piece, and Gabrielina Frank is their mentor. And then we performed Shostakovich Piano Concerto No. 2, intermission, and then we did Rachmaninoff Symphony No. 2. How amazing. So again, this feeling of time and creative process. I think,
Ray,
yes.
I had a question, Ray. What were your expectations for this piece?
What was my expectations for the piece? Well, I think being in a classical kind of background of, you know, perfecting everything always have to, you know, be on top of controlling whatever you can control. You know, you have to be prepared. You have to be fully, you know, in the moment. And this process with the readings and working with these composers, again, like living composers. I mean, imagine that, you know. Imagine if I could ask, you know, Rachmaninoff, how do you do that fingering? How did you do that passage?
Would think he'd be honest in his answer?
I think so. What do you think, Barry?
Well, there's a story that his performances on record of his concertos, people would say, oh, they're very fast and quite not much freedom. And then I heard from somebody who knew somebody who had known Rachmaninoff, this was in Russia, that he purposely did that to stop pianists taking too many liberties with his music.
I like that.
Well, and I think for me, the process of having these readings and not knowing the end product was for me, it's a way to open myself up as an artist to understand the creative process. And also with the musicians, they had input throughout the readings. These are workshops when we talk about readings. So they wrote down notes for the composers, they gave the composers feedback, and to have that interaction and that collaboration. And Mas was at every single reading, and we really appreciated having you there. And Barry, you were in the rehearsals watching Meguru come to life as well. And I think all of us as artists, we need to support each other in that way, that it's not just, I do my job, and, you know, you do your job, and then we, you know, that's the end. But I feel like, you know, here, especially here with the Fresno Philharmonic, we really like to embrace everyone and involve everyone in the creative process. So thank you for being here and doing that. So Mas has this wonderful way of talking about this process, and he's like, what is the sound of your childhood? And I'd love to ask each of you what your sound of your childhood is. Erika, why don't you start?
The first sound I think of is the guitar, because our dad's a guitar player, and he's also a songwriter, so he used to just play guitar and sing all the time in our home.
And like we were talking about your book, Mas, being a sensory experience. What about the other senses? So it's sound. What is the feeling of your childhood?
Did you fight with your sister very much? That's what I'm curious about. They collaborated amazingly. I mean, just watching them collaborate was just stunning on that. I'm sorry, go ahead, Erika.
We did fight as kids. I think we did, yeah. But I think, through this process too, I think I was only able to do a project on this scale with Hitomi because of the relationship that we have of knowing each other our whole lives and have our ways of communicating and working through, some challenging things. And I feel very lucky.
Thank you. Hitomi?
Yeah, reflecting on Mas's kind of prompt, it actually did bring in a lot of the themes that we've been talking about. So I've been reflecting on sounds, and my recognition and memory of sound, because I'm going through this cycle right now where I have young children, and sometimes they have sounds like my toddler, like running down the hall. It will bring me back to think, oh, I know that sound. That's the sound of my sister. Right? And I haven't thought of that for decades, but it was somewhere in there, and that's a sound. Certain, smells, and also, tastes. You start eating things that maybe you hadn't eaten in childhood. And so this project has been about cycles, but also cycles going through time forward, right? So I feel like I'm doing this spiral as well. I'm coming and meeting circles again, but also I'm at a different stage now and able to reflect in a different way in these same places again. So it's really tied into the themes that we've been talking about, and like how that ties into identity and such.
Barry? Your sound of your childhood. What is that like?
Well, apart from the bombs that were going off in Belfast, no. I was looking, my bedroom was at the back of the house and it was on the top floor, and so I was in the trees just at the edge of Botanic Park. And so what I heard, I remember, was just constant birdsong and the rustling of the leaves, and that moves me. And our house in Ireland is now amongst the trees, and so I've got that same thing that gives me comfort. But that's my childhood.
Very nice. I think of the sound of leaves too, but I grew up really with the sound of a shovel digging into the dirt, and here in the valley we have a lot of sandy loam, so the shovels just kind of scrape on the top of it. And I just remember thinking of the rhythm of work, and at the same time the tedious nature of work too. And so that's music to me, is that kind of rhythm and the tenacity with it. So Ray, what's your childhood?
Well, I remember umeboshi as a child. Do you know what umeboshi is? It's the sour plum that you eat with rice. And I just love that taste. And it just evokes so much of my childhood, because I was born in Japan. And I was 3 years old, and my mother said, you just loved eating those all the time. And I still do. So it's this sour, feeling and taste. But that's evoking my childhood.
Can you imagine Ray slurping with that sound? And that's the rhythm that I want to hear.
But anyway, I want to open up the floor to some questions for our guests. Any questions?
This is an assumption, and it could be incorrect, but because of Rachmaninoff having this be number 2 and Opus 18, is it? Was there a number 1, and if so, have you performed it? And was there other opuses as part of 2 that you performed?
Yeah, he wrote 4 concertos and also the Paganini variations, Rhapsody on the Theme of Paganini, which is very famous. His first concerto was Opus 1, and it eventually had 3 versions. The first version, it was based on the Greek piano concerto. It's got exactly the same structure, the same way he treats the piano, and where the declamatory things are and where the meditative moments are. Exactly the same, almost to the second. And it was written when he was a student. But then he did a second version, which was, he tidied everything up with maturity. And then the third version is he tidied up the orchestra parts a bit. So, no, it's a fantastic piece.
Any other questions? Yes.
I have come across only one collaboration of a composer and a relative, in this case, the composer's father, which was, I guess, reasonably successful. So I'm astonished that you sisters have been able to collaborate so very well. I mean, there's a lot of ego in being a composer, and
What's your secret to composing together,
I think,
co-collaborating?
oh, do you want me to go? I think that having a lot of shared background did help in this case, right? And we have a lot of not just personal shared background, but a lot of shared musical background. We grew up playing music together in a lot of the same music programs. We had a lot of the same mentors, and we definitely went our own paths, like in college and stuff. But we have mutual understanding, you know, collaborators, and we've also, I think, notably improvised together quite a bit. So we are familiar with each other's musical language. In terms of communication, I feel like we've been working, you know, on higher levels of communication now just by working on this project as well.
Yes. Thank you. No, that's okay. Any other questions? Yes.
You said that the performances were really different yesterday and today. Could you guys all talk about how, in what ways? What you can say about that?
Yes. Well, I think we had been rehearsing all week on this piece, and what was great was this collaboration in the rehearsals that I could turn around and ask Hitomi and Erika, is that okay? Do you want this to come out more? And then, you know, telling the orchestra the story of Mas's family also made the orchestra play it differently. So having that quick interaction with these elements, collaborators, right away with the orchestra, made the orchestra play it better, I think. And so our first performance was last night. And there were a couple things, you know, I think in any performance, as a performer, you know, we're human, you know, so there are always adjustments to be made. And I think today it just felt more settled, like the musicians had gone through it and could understand more of where the phrases were going. I could also conduct it better because now this is the second time. This is the second time this piece has ever been performed, ever, you know? So it's every time it will have a different life. And like Barry was saying, every performance is different. You bring a different element to it. And I think the musicians, maybe they had a good night's rest, you know? I mean, it really depends, I think.
How many rehearsals do you normally have for any particular?
For the Fresno Philharmonic, every concert, Masterworks concert, we have 4 rehearsals total. Yes. We start Wednesday evenings, and then we have the concert on Saturday and Sunday. And then with Barry, we only rehearse twice, correct? Yes. And that's kind of usual for a soloist to come in, we run through it, we work on it twice. Yes. Yes.
This is more kind of a technical question, but what was that bowed percussion instrument that was played? It evoked the absolute perfect emotion.
That was Boat Critalis. That was one of my favorite sounds. I was so happy with how that turned out.
Describe what it is.
Critalis?
And what were you trying to evoke with that?
That particular moment, I think, I was trying to evoke the desert once they'd been sent to their camps and kind of this like barren landscape with these dry, difficult winds.
So I would love to ask a fun question for each of our guests here. So for the composers, can you name the top 3 composers that inspire you, that you love, that in order, like the number 1 is, number 2 is, number 3. And it doesn't have to be classical, you know, but composers, other composers. Should we come back? Okay. Okay, so let them sit with that one. Barry.
Oh no.
If you were going to have a dinner party and you could invite any 3 guests from any era, who would they be?
Well, I was thinking of I read a fantastic biography of Liszt, and I studied with a pupil of Liszt when I was 16 to 20. So I thought, I'd like to have Liszt and Wagner and Emil von Sauer, who was one of the last pupils of Liszt in Weimar, who taught my teacher. So I'd like to have them around a table, and then I would say, thank you, Emil, for teaching Felicitas, who taught me. Then I would say to Liszt and Wagner, you guys have got to make up and be nice to each other. But, yeah. Because Wagner, he was a great composer, but he just took. He took Liszt's daughter, he took Liszt's money. Liszt was too soft.
Wow. And Mas, who would you invite to a dinner party?
I think I'd invite my grandparents and my grandfathers who I never met because they passed away before I was born. And I'd like to ask them, like, why did you come to Fresno? But then also ask them questions about, both of them were involved with an arranged marriage, right? Because they came first and then they sent back to their little village for their brides to come too. And I actually, when I was younger, I thought that is wild. But now that I'm older, I thought, that's an interesting dynamic of how to arrange a marriage in that. And that's part of that sounds of nature. Can you imagine the sound of a future husband and wife meeting each other for the first time? And it would probably have silence in it. And that silence is part of both the harmony and disharmony of our histories. And that's what I try to capture the most.
Wow, that's fabulous. Okay, back to Erika.
All right. I'm going to go with some people that I actually know. So the first composer who ever really inspired me to want to pursue music as a career was our mentor, Peter Alphabom. He's a jazz musician and composer based in New York, and I got to meet him when I was 12, and I saw him live with his large ensemble around that age, and it was the most striking thing I'd ever experienced, and after that concert, I was like, I think I might want to do this. So that's one. I always want to give him a shout out for that. Two, definitely Gabriele and Frank. Just a huge, huge, huge influence musically and personally. And then I feel like I should at least name one composer that I don't personally know. So one that I've just drawn a lot of inspiration from over the years and who also just made me want to play music differently was Thelonious Monk.
Ray, this is a personal thing. I'm really bad at lists and best of lists. It's just,
Okay.
my friends know this.
I'm sorry, I didn't know that. Now I know.
I will try. So I think my answer will be, right now, I've been thinking about malleability in music, and so the three composers that maybe have been influencing me as I think about just how to mold things is Laura Mvula, singer, songwriter, Laura Mvula, just how she does it, and Charles Mingus, also malleability, and who was the other one? Oh, and Toru Takemitsu.
Oh,
Yeah. Specific element.
Thank you for doing that. Well, thank you so
Ray,
much. Yes.
Ray, how about yours?
Yes. Oh. Which question?
At least one composer. What's one composer you like to have dinner with?
Which? Oh my gosh!
And you could insult the composer too, right?
I think Gustav Mahler.
Oh, really?
I would love to sit down and have dinner with him. Although well, I think there's just so much to his psyche in his music and his emotional output that I'd love to explore his mind a little bit, yeah, and how he came to be who he is, in so many different ways. Beethoven. I know this sounds so standard, but Beethoven, for sure. And I don't know, I think I have such admiration for living composers, as you all know. And I just think that the world of composers, they are pushing our art form forward. Without them, we won't have the music of a 21st century. And so I just really have such a big heart for them, you know. So thank you both for being here and working with us. And thank you, Mas, for inspiring us. And thank you, Barry, for just an incredible, incredible performance. Thank you all. Have a great afternoon.